Although first, if we are to examine Martin Scorsese's long career of 27 released motion pictures, beginning from 1967, we do have to discuss what Martin Scorsese was like before 1967. Martin Scorsese, a man born in 1942, America, New York. He was an Italian-American citizen, and throughout his whole life, he was often in love with the medium of cinema. One of his most favorite pastime as a child was to go to the cinemas every time he could, with any little bit of money he could, and he'd spend it on as many tickets to watch as many films as possible. Watching and admiring all these films eventually made him have an interest in film directing himself. Watching many films over the years, Martin Scorsese has said that he had many great influences from directors. What much include the numerous westerns by John Ford, like The Searchers, which was a staple for how many directors would create films. The lighting, the direction, the story, the positioning, and also was one of the few films in color released in the 50s. Other American directors include Orson Welles and his revolutionary way of writing. Other directors include Orson Welles and his revolutionary way of lighting and cinematography as well. This incredibly inspired Mr. Martin Scorsese. It wasn't through his films like Citizen Kane and The Third Man. This type of storytelling and cinematography was incredibly interesting to Scorsese. But it's not just Americans. Foreign directors had also influenced Martin Scorsese, such as Italian directors like Michelangelo Antonioni, and also Federico Fellini. Being Italian, this must have been even more appreciative to Martin Scorsese, as he was more into these film directors, and it was also good to see a guy who was Italian. This is all according to the man himself, as he said this in an interview he did in 1994 with Charlie Ross. By 1967, at the age of 24, he decided to direct his first film, which was titled Who's That Knocking at My Door? And that has expanded a long career of 27 films. So how does he tell his story in each of these 27 films? Well, let's start with cinematography. Martin Scorsese also often uses visual storytelling to display the stories of the characters and display the story. I can think of many examples of him doing this. For example, in his film, also greatly used by Martin Scorsese. He can either use songs to tell the story to the audience of the characters, or characterize the silence to display the story. I can think of examples of him doing either. In Goodfellas, many songs are used in the film to show how the story is progressing through time. When the main character, Henry Hill, is showing his home life as a kid, the songs that played in the scene that takes place in the 1950s are songs from the 50s. However, as the film goes on, a scene from the 70s, the song that plays over it is the song Sunshine of Your Love, a song of which that takes place during the 70s. The scene takes place during the 70s, but the song is from the 60s. These songs are used during the period of the time of which the scene takes place to show how the time of the character has progressively aged. Color is also greatly used by Scorsese in multiple ways throughout the color spectrum. For example, in the film Mean Streets from 1973, the color red is very commonly used in both it's to display the violent setting as well as the fact that there is so much rage in the characters in the film throughout the film. During most of the film, either the set is red or the lighting is red, or both at the same time. Another example of color being used for storytelling purposes is his film Taxi Driver. The main character, Travis Bickle, feels ostracized by society, not fitting in and feeling as if he doesn't belong. Scorsese uses colors in the costumes of the characters to reflect this. For example, the girl he has a crush on, named Betty, is dressed in bright red clothing to show an enthusiasm and outgoing nature. Travis's clothes are a darker red and neutral colours, and like dark green and brown, to display how he is very different compared to her, and is much more reserved. Martin Scorsese doesn't really do many cuts within the shots of his films. Most of them feature no cuts at all. This is because he likes to explain and amplify the incredible mass of a shot and how brilliant it is. He often does this quite frequently. The type of shots he uses are usually not close-up shots, but long extended shots or medium shots. This is to display the character from a good eye level, not too in close, but you can also see everything else within the background of the scene, to show and display truly the great cinematography that is implemented within the scene. But an example of his characterization of silence is in the movie titled, Silence, The Silence, ironically. Released in 2016, it tells the tale of two Jewish priests, Sebastião Rodrigues and Francis Garappi, who travel to 17th century Japan. They are separated, and we follow Father Francis Garappi as he is subjected to the horror of how the marginalized Christians in Japan were treated at the time. There is almost no music used by Scorsese throughout this movie. Because he wanted to display how horrifying the events of the film were. The other distraught of seeing people being tortured and killed. There is no sound that you can allow to escape from the horror, which you cannot witness. You just have to sit there, nothing to distract you, watching this awful event. Scorsese has delved into many genres, but the one most synonymous with him are crime and the drama genre. He's directed Mean Streets, Goodfellas, Casino, and Gangs of New York, and The Irishman, all of which have come under the genre description of drama and crime, and they've had a great influence on these genres of film. Many directors such as Paul Thomas Anderson, Ron Kar-wai, and Bong Joon-ho have been influenced by Scorsese's no-cut editing style, interesting cinematography, as well as his use of actors such as Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Joe Pesci, which have caused them to get great roles elsewhere. Because these directors are so influenced by Scorsese's work, they want to use his actors, use his editing, use his style, use his colors, use everything. They're so influenced, which is why Scorsese is so influential, and many people love him, because he's one of the greatest directors, if not the greatest, in cinematic history. Another theme displayed by Scorsese is the power of greed. Many of the characters in his films are filled with pride, such as Henry Hill from Goodfellas, Eddie Elson from The Color of Money. They aren't just filled with pride, they're filled with desire for money, which doesn't help them. Both these characters are constantly hunting down the search for money, and trying to get money, and are paying a price for their greed. Henry Hill is ostracized by the mafia and is undertaking a witness protection program from them. He tried to get greed, but he went to jail and he got ostracized by his own people. While Eddie, in The Color of Money, is left feeling isolated from the company from his partner that he used to get money for. Speaking of money, it's probably the most common MacGuffin in Scorsese's films. In Goodfellas, Casino, The Irishman, The Departed, and The Color of Money, majority of the characters are motivated by the chase of money and keep it, which is what causes their climax and resolving act. Many themes are displayed individually throughout the film, throughout any films of his. For example, in the film he directed, 1991, Cape Fear, it tells the story of a ruthless psychopath who stalks down and tries to hunt down his lawyer who screwed him over. Many themes are subtly displayed or not subtly in the film, such as the critique of the justice system and discussion of if revenge is justified. The character Max, played by Robert De Niro, is a crazed psychopath who travels down to hunt his previous lawyer, Sam Bowden, played by Nick Notel, for making him go to jail, as he was guilty and his lawyer knew that. Similarly, in the film The King of Comedy, released in 1982, it follows the story of Ruth Pumpkin, played by Robert De Niro, attempting revenge against his once hero, Jerry Longford, who feels has wronged him, so he demands respect from Longford and kidnaps him, harasses him due to Longford getting more cross at him. Another film, Casino, he made, in 1995, one of the main characters, Nicky Serrato, played by Joe Pesci, tries to get revenge on his bosses, which gets him killed. Rupert Pumpkin got ostracized and put in jail, and Max, who Robert De Niro also played, was killed. What do these have in common? These three characters, they tried to get revenge, and they got killed or something else. Rupert Pumpkin got ostracized and put in jail by society. But they all show a critique of revenge on Scorsese's behalf. That it's not a good idea. These characters were filmed prior to get what they wanted, but it ended up screwing them over.